Now that you've had an opportunity to simmer down after our introduction with 4 dot or 4 dot, not 4 dash, 4 dot 2, the if statement, I had started to seed, well, what happens if we have more than one statement that we want to make when that if statement evaluates as true? And that's where we get in the expanded if statement here on page 164. And what I want to do is just take you to page, it is 167 here. So this is figure 4-5, and this is on page 167. And we would have what I would consider to be a classically written, so chapter 2 and chapter 3, statement in C++. We would have, I'm just going to call it lines number 1, 2, and 3 to make this really, 1, 2, 3, and 4, to make this really easy on us when we're going through this particular piece of code. So the first bit there is figure 4-5. We have our if statement. So when C++ comes to this if statement, it has to evaluate whatever's happening there inside of the parentheses. So is average greater than high score? If that evaluates as true, the next line, line number 2, is executed on. Congratulations. And that's it. Then line number 3 would execute. Under normal operating conditions, number 3 would execute. That's a high score. And number 4 would execute. You deserve a pat on the back. Now, let's see what happens if I have an average that is less than high score. So this time around, the user in the line before this enters in a 15. So an egregiously low score. So 15 is evaluated. 15 is not, in fact, greater than high score. So line number 2, the congratulations line, is not executed on. So that if statement evaluated as false. So that means that the line that precedes the if statement is skipped. In normal operating procedure now, line number 3 is executed on. So it says that's a high score. Then line number 4, you deserve a pat on the back. So what ends up happening is that somebody with a terminally low score, 15, is told that's a high score, you deserve a pat on the back. And the reason this happens is that in the normal flow of a program, top to bottom, left to right, exclusively in that order, we get line number 1 is executed on, even when we execute as false. So line number 2 is skipped, but then in normal flow, number 3 happens after that. So this is not what we want to have happen. So I have somebody with a score of a 15, egregiously low, like, I guess I did pretty good. And that's not the impression that we want to give. So how do we circumvent this? How can we show that, in fact, no, that's not a high score? What do I do as a developer to have more than one line of statement that follows an if where I can put pieces of my logic into? Now, this is program 4-6. We're going to see an example of this in the code sample set at the end of the chapter, so I don't feel like we have to go too deeply into this here. But this is program 4-6, and this is on page 164. And you can see here on line 24, we have our if statement. And on line 25, we have an opening curly brace. And then on line number 29, we have its associated closing brace. So when C++ has these braces that follow our if statement, that is a statement block. These things go together. So the one line or the one thing that a C++ sees that happens after a true evaluation is not going to be just line number 25. It's everything that happens between lines 25 and 29. So this actually represents better code. And what I would tell you is, even if you only have one line of logic inside of the result of an if statement, It is always better to open and close a curly brace and put your line in there, because later on you might come back, you might add more code, you might use this someplace else, and you'll forget that it's only one line that you have associated with that if statement, and you could make a mistake. And I will tell you, I do this all the time, just as a matter of course. I have an if statement, I hit enter. Replit and Xcode and Visual Studio Community and all the rest of the good, text editors / developers environments do this for you. When I open a left curly brace, it automatically gives me the closing right curly brace, so that I don't have to worry about how much of my statement is wrapped up in that statement block. It does it automatically for me, and it prevents me, the developer, from making an egregious mistake telling somebody with a score of 15 that you did a pretty good job. So the statement block, the opening and closing curly brace, we have seen them main that we have used this whole time. So here in program 4-6 on page 165, you'll see on line number 8, we have our int main. That's the main portion of our program that we've been putting everything into to date. But you'll notice lines number 9 and 31 has an opening and a closing curly brace. That is a statement block. So we've added a statement block between lines 25 and 29 that can be evaluated as essentially the one thing that follows our if statement. So the statement block is how we can expand the logic that comes after our simple if statements.